After acing my audition, I missed the last bus and my boyfriend went MIA. When I was being assaulted by thugs, his brother, whom I'd refused a ride from, suddenly showed up to save me, but I couldn't figure out his feelings. The moment the heavy auditorium door slammed shut behind me, I could no longer hold it in. The judge's subtle smiles during the audition kept flashing through my mind, like a beam of light slicing through all my anxiety. Joy exploded from my chest, spreading down my limbs and soaking every inch of my skin. Even my fingertips felt faintly numb, as if my entire body were cheering aloud for this victory. I let out a scream, a mix of ecstatic laughter and a sob of relief, and threw both arms high above my head. On the cracked sidewalk just outside the door, I spun around in place several times, my skirt tracing graceful arcs with each movement. At that moment, I didn't care who might see me, didn't care if my dance outfit was disheveled, didn't care if my sneakers creaked underfoot. I was completely immersed in an overwhelming, reckless joy. Even the air seemed sweet, wrapped in the warmth of the sun. I did it. I gave it my all, every single ounce of my energy, every last bit of my heart, to the dance. I wasn't stage frightened. I didn't let fear hold me back. I tiptoed and bounced, the thin fabric of my short top sliding up my arms with each movement. The hair bun I'd carefully pulled tight just hours earlier had come undone, strands of sweat-dampened hair cascading down my back. I was still wearing my ballet outfit, a tight-fitting leotard over sweatpants, my point shoes replaced by worn-out sneakers that creaked softly with every step. But none of that mattered anymore. Even if I were wrapped in a garbage bag right this moment, I'd still feel like today's sunshine was shining just for me. I can't wait to tell Taylor. I want to message Mira. I long to finally take a deep, liberating breath and let that heavy knot of fear in my chest completely melt away. I bounded down the steps in front of my house 2 at a time, humming under my breath, then pulled out my phone and headed across the street toward the bus stop. The sky was still light, barely light really. The sun had begun to sink behind the rooftops, and the heavens were suffused with a soft, rose-golden glow, so breathtakingly beautiful it almost seemed unreal. The bus stop was deserted. The benches gleamed coldly under the streetlights, and the bus shelter sign creaked gently in the breeze. I leaned closer to the bus schedule posted on the metal pole, squinting hard to make out the details. My heart felt light and buoyant, brimming with joy to the point that I couldn't even bring myself to worry. Then my jaw dropped. I glanced at the paper timetable, then checked my phone. I looked back at the timetable again, then at my phone once more. This couldn't be right. My smile froze, and for the first time, tiny cracks began to appear on its surface. The last bus home had left 20 minutes ago. My stomach sank abruptly, and a wave of icy discomfort washed over me, a chill utterly unrelated to any sense of excitement. It's okay. It's okay. I opened the ride-hailing app, my fingers suddenly clumsy from nerves. I stared at the loading circle for a while, then suddenly a message popped up on the screen, and in an instant, it stole my breath away. The current time period is busy. There are no available drivers in your area right now. I stared at the screen for what felt like ages, hoping against hope that it would suddenly change. But it didn't. The air seemed to grow suddenly colder, and the chill seeped through the thin fabric of my short top, making the sweat on my skin sticky and uncomfortable. I scanned the street back and forth, empty as far as the eye could see, with only a few cars passing by, their headlights slicing through the darkness that was slowly descending. I bit my lip, pulled my sleeve up over my palm, and dialed Taylor's number. The call went straight to voicemail. I frowned, tried again, and began pacing restlessly in small circles near the bus stop. Still no answer. I closed my eyes, forcing down the wave of frustration that was welling up inside me, and flipped to the Hayes family's phone number. Maybe he was home. Maybe he'd just, like always, been too busy watching the game with Dad to bother checking his phone. The phone rang. It kept ringing. Then click. A voice came through. Rough. Deep. Not Taylor's. Hello. The voice was cold and curt, unmistakably Asher's. I froze, my breath caught in my throat, my mind going blank for a moment before I stammered out, hi, sorry, it's me, Penny. The line fell silent, an eerie silence that felt interminable, as if stretched out into infinity. Then, in a tone that was flat and detached, he said, "Taylor's not here." I squeezed my eyes shut and pinched the bridge of my nose. "Do you happen to know when he'll be back?" I tried to make my voice sound relaxed and casual, but my voice kept trembling at the edges. "I don't know." Asher's words cut through like a knife. I couldn't help but sigh and blurt out, "All right, thanks anyway." Just as I was about to hang up, his voice came through again, hoarse and impatient. "What's wrong?" I hesitated, the phone heavy against my ear. For half a second, I wanted to lie and say everything was fine, that I'd figure things out on my own. But there was something in his tone, rough yet almost caring, that made me stop myself. "Nothing," I quickly said, "but thanks again." "Penny," his voice grew firm, "what's really going on?" I swallowed hard, shifting my weight from one foot to the other. The audition took longer than I'd expected. I finally blurted out, speaking rapidly. "I missed the last bus, and no taxi drivers would take my call." "But it's okay. I'll just walk back," I said. There was a pause on the other end of the line. A long, meaningful pause. "Where are you?" His voice was low and sharp. "It doesn't matter." I snapped back, my chest burning with anger. What I needed least right now was yet another lecture, another judgment from someone who thought they knew it all. "You've never made a backup plan?" The incredulity in his tone ignited my fury completely. "I'm hanging up," I ground out through clenched teeth, hitting the end call button before he could even respond. I shoved the phone into my pocket so hard that my fingertips ached. Damn him. Stupid, judgmental, condescending bastard. I slumped onto the cold metal bench, resting my forehead against my knees, trying hard to think, trying hard to breathe. "Fine. Think of something. Either wait a bit and hope a driver picks up the ride, or head downtown. There's more traffic there, more bus routes, and more people too."
"Right."
"That's it. Let's do just that." I pulled out my phone and quickly sent Taylor a message. "It's over. Give me a call when you're free." I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, foolishly hoping it would suddenly vibrate, hoping he'd reply, "Call me back," or "do_something_." But nothing happened. Streetlights flickered on one after another, and gradually, the world faded from gold to gray. I stood up, tightened the strap of my dance bag across my shoulder, and started walking toward downtown. The rhythm of my sneakers hitting the pavement sounded like a never-ending loop. Lonely, lonely, lonely.
I rounded the corner slowly, the steering wheel creaking softly in my hands. My gaze swept over the darkening sidewalk, and the anger deep inside me coalesced into a cold knot, tightening with each passing moment. This is just ridiculous. Absolutely, utterly ridiculous. I shouldn't have spent the whole night here, cruising down half-abandoned streets, searching for a girl who should have been taken care of already. I muttered under my breath, my words sharp and venomous, filling the car's interior. I tapped the brakes lightly, driving past yet another empty intersection. If Taylor had even a shred of sense, or a scrap of conscience, right now, it'd be him here, not me. It'd be him flooring the gas pedal, muttering curses under his breath, scanning every shadow, searching for that blonde, stubborn figure dressed far too lightly. But no. Once again, Taylor has gone AWOL. As usual. Maybe he's still glued to the couch, maybe he's hanging out with friends, maybe he's doing anything but paying attention to that girl, anything, really, whether he realizes it or not. That girl deserves so much more than to be treated like some disposable sidekick. I clenched my teeth tighter and tighter. The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. My anger burned fiercely, and my chest felt as though something were blocking it, both stifled and scorching hot. Just thinking about her, a young girl wearing a thin dance outfit, walking alone on a deserted street in the fading twilight, made me uncontrollably agitated, and even subtly anxious. I shouldn't have let her hang up like that, much less left her to fend for herself. Penny sounded fine on the phone, pretending to be calm, even light-hearted. But I knew all too well. I recognized only too clearly that forced strength in her voice, that pretense meant to reassure whoever was on the other end of the line. I'd heard it so many times in my life, once, and I could spot it immediately. And I knew this area inside out. This morning, out of sheer curiosity, I'd looked it up, just to find out what kind of place could possibly host auditions for the city's grand celebration. Remote. It's sparsely populated. By all accounts, it's not exactly dangerous, but being so remote means that if anything goes wrong, there's simply no one around to help. Just thinking about the worst-case scenario makes my heart sink, and any lingering hesitation I had is instantly washed away by sheer worry. There's absolutely no one around to lend a hand. After she hung up on me, I sank back onto the sofa, staring blankly at the muted football game on TV. Dad had already dozed off in his chair. I managed to hold out for maybe 10 seconds. Each second felt like an eternity of torture. In my mind, her voice on the phone kept replaying, calm and composed, yet somehow forced, and then there was Tyler, with his nonchalant, asshole attitude. The mix of anger and worry surged through me, propelling me to leap to my feet in one swift motion. It was anger that drove me to stand up. I grabbed the keys, floored the accelerator, and sped onto the highway, heading toward the other side of the city. And now here I am, driving through the dark streets packed with drunken college students and early bird bar hoppers. I scanned every face, every stretch of sidewalk, searching for that furious ballet dancer, who had no idea just how dangerous it was to be walking alone right now. I tapped my fingers on the steering wheel, my gaze darting left, then right, then left again. Where on earth was she? Could she already be in danger? Anxiety coiled around my heart like a vine, tightening more and more until I could barely breathe. Then, finally, I spotted her. A tiny figure hurried along the sidewalk, her blonde hair catching the last rays of sunlight, her sneakers tapping out a quick, steady rhythm. A wave of relief washed over me in an instant, like ice water dousing half of my restlessness. I almost missed the turn, but thankfully, she was still safe. The thought eased my frayed nerves just a bit, yet immediately, anger surged back to replace it. How could she possibly be walking so carelessly, so completely unguarded, right by the side of the road? I parked my car beside hers, rolled down the window, and the engine rumbled softly in the background. She didn't notice a thing. My jaw ached so tightly I felt both furious and frantic, furious at her reckless disregard for danger, and even more frantic about her safety. What if that car just now had been driven by someone sinister? By now, she'd already. I couldn't bear to think further. A black car pulled up silently beside her in the darkness, yet she didn't even flinch. What on earth had her parents taught her about basic safety? Leaning forward, I shouted sharply, "Penny!" She jumped nearly a foot into the air, let out a short, sharp scream, and whirled around to face me, clutching her chest as if her heart were about to leap right out of it. Her eyes widened in terror, and she stammered, Usher. As if she weren't sure whether it was real or just a hallucination. I stared at her, rage boiling inside me once again, but mixed with a flicker of relief, too. I'm glad I made it here, glad she hasn't gotten into any trouble yet. But her completely nonchalant demeanor makes me want to shake her awake. Get in the car, I said curtly, leaving no room for argument. She collected herself for a moment, then raised her hand to smooth out her disheveled hair. Her cheeks flushed crimson with embarrassment. Then, she frowned. How did you even find me? She demanded, her face lighting up with suspicious sparks. I raised an eyebrow and asked, is that so strange? She pressed her lips together tightly and muttered under her breath, yeah, a former Navy SEAL, too. Finding her hadn't been difficult at all. On a Sunday, there were only a handful of venues in this city big enough to accommodate hundreds of dancers. And her parents had already told me which side of town she'd be on. It wasn't exactly rocket science. Get in the car, I repeated, my tone growing even more impatient, but instead of doing as I asked, she straightened her shoulders and said, no. I froze, stunned, like I'd been hit by a brick wall. No? She turned around and kept walking, her sneakers slapping heavily against the sidewalk, her dance bag awkwardly bumping against her hip. I watched in disbelief as she stepped off the sidewalk and crossed a patch of overgrown weeds, a place far from the road, far from the only source of light and safety. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the leather seemed to groan under my grip. Leaning out the window, I spoke in a voice both harsh and loud, cutting through the darkness. I'm asking you one last time, I snapped. After this, I'm leaving. But she didn't even turn her head. My blood was boiling, anger churned beneath my skin, deep and relentless. Yet, at the very moment she turned away, my heart felt as if it had been grabbed by a handful of unease. She just walked away like that. Driving through this place where even streetlights are few and far between. Sure thing. Sure thing. I jerked the wheel hard, let out a furious curse, and floored the gas pedal, speeding off the street, my headlights blurring into a haze of anger. Stupid. Stubborn. Obsessed with saving face. I don't owe her anything. She wants to play the tragic hero? Fine by me. I don't care anymore. But even as that thought flashes through my mind, even as I speed away, there's still something sharp and tight in my chest, deeply rooted inside. It's not just anger, it's more like a worry I'm reluctant even to admit to myself, a worry that that stubborn little girl might actually get herself into real trouble. Because it's already pitch black out here. This neighborhood isn't safe at all. No matter how much she pisses me off, no matter how crazy she drives me, she shouldn't be left here alone. I slam my fist onto the steering wheel, growl under my breath, and make a sharp U-turn, the tires screeching loudly against the cracked asphalt. When I returned to the spot where I'd last seen her, she was gone. I slammed on the brakes, yanked open the car door, and leapt out, scanning the sidewalk, the alleyways, every shadowy corner. There was nothing there at all. My heart pounded fiercely against my ribs, and anger surged up once more, angrier, fiercer, yet mingled beneath it with an even darker emotion, panic. Where on earth was she? Could something really have happened to her? That fear threatened to swallow me whole, a feeling I'd never experienced before, not even during the most dangerous missions. Where was she? I quickened my pace, striding forward through the nearest alleyway, my boots crunching over shards of glass and gravel. Then I heard it, a voice. Faint. Full of fear. Please don't do this. My blood turned to ice in an instant, every drop of it seemed to freeze solid, and a chill shot straight from the soles of my feet up to the top of my head. That was her voice, the voice of Penny, filled with a sobbing plea that felt like a knife plunging straight into my heart. I quickened my pace, moving silently, as instinct took over completely. Every single muscle in my body was taut and on edge. I turned into another alleyway and saw her, surrounded. 3 men, looking like college students, maybe even older, reeking of alcohol, their eyes clouded yet predatory, stood above her, pressing her against the cold brick wall, leaving her with nowhere to retreat. One of them had grabbed her arm, his fingers slowly tracing patterns along the sleeve of her jacket. Another was holding her dance bag, laughing as if he'd just found a brand new toy. The third man stood behind her, too close, his breath hot against the back of her neck. Just then, I caught snippets of their harsh laughter and mumbled words, "Come on, baby. What are you afraid of? You're so delicate, you came out here all by yourself. What did you expect?" Penny's face was deathly pale, her lips trembling, and her big eyes filled with tears. Somewhere deep inside me, a string snapped. A searing rage surged up in an instant, engulfing every other emotion, a melange of fury, heartache, and sheer terror. I'd been too late, I'd almost let those bastards hurt her. Without thinking twice, I acted. I didn't have time to breathe. I didn't have time to think. In 3 swift strides, I was right in front of her, my massive frame standing between her and them. They all turned around, startled, sizing me up with the arrogant swagger typical of drunkards, the kind who always think they've never picked the wrong fight. One of them, still clutching his dance bag, stepped forward and sneered, "Get out of our way, old man." I clenched my fists, my knuckles cracking audibly. "You've got only one chance." My voice was low and deadly, calm before the storm. "Or else." The guy holding Penny sneered, gripping her arm tightly enough to make her flinch in pain. That was the last thing he ever did. In an instant, I seized his wrist and twisted it sharply backward. He screamed in agony, and his dance bag thudded onto the floor. The second assailant lunged at me, easily dodging his clumsy attack. I delivered a powerful punch straight to his gut, watching him curl up like a crumpled piece of paper. The third guy hesitated for too long, so I shoved him hard against the wall. He gasped for air, unable to catch his breath. Within 10 seconds, All three men were sprawled on the ground, moaning and clutching their bodies, their eyes wide with fear, the kind of belated fear that finally dawned on them. They picked the wrong opponent. I turned around, stepping between them and Penny, my whole body radiating an unyielding aura that warned them not to dare try anything again. They didn't dare. Struggling to get up, they cursed under their breath, tripped over each other, and vanished into the shadows. I stood rooted to the spot, gasping for air, my hands clenched tightly at my sides. Then I turned around. Penny was frozen against the wall, trembling so violently that even from afar I could see it. Her hands were shaking, her lips quivering, tears streaming down her flushed cheeks. A sharp pain gripped my chest, the fury began to fade, replaced by a dense wave of heartache. She was so small, so fragile, and yet she was trembling all over, utterly terrified. All of this could have been avoided, if only Taylor had paid a little more attention, if only I'd found her sooner. I started walking toward her slowly, moving with the utmost care, as gently as one would approach an injured little animal, but she remained completely still, standing there, trembling, tiny and fragile yet far braver than she ever had any right to be. And me, I had no idea what to do next. The moment those guys disappeared around the corner of the alley, the moment the danger was finally over, I turned back to look at her, rage, fury, and adrenaline surging through me almost beyond control, finally bursting forth in full force. In that fury, there was hatred for those bastards, disappointment in Taylor, and even anger at her for being so disobedient. But deep down, there was something else, a profound sense of dread, mixed with relief that she hadn't been truly hurt after all. She stood there, small and shaking, still trying to pretend she was braver than she really was, and that very image only made my anger burn even fiercer. "What on earth were you thinking?" I snapped, unable to stop myself from taking a step closer. My voice was rough and sharp, cutting through the air like a blade. She flinched almost imperceptibly, yet she still lifted her chin, forcing herself to stand tall, trying to meet my gaze, even though her whole body was trembling violently, every line of it tense and rigid. "This only makes me angrier," I roared, slamming my fist into the wall above her head. The impact echoed through the narrow alleyway. She gasped sharply, instinctively flinching backward. I leaned in closer to her, every muscle in my body trembling with pent-up fury. "You almost..." I abruptly stopped myself, panting heavily as I forced a word that had nearly slipped out, "died, back down." My fists clenched tightly at my sides, my knuckles throbbing with numbing pain. "You're just so stubborn," I hissed, each word hitting her like a punch. "Do you think you're invincible? Just because you can walk home alone for 10 minutes without running into any trouble, and even lucked out this time?" She looked up at me, her big eyes wide with shock and trembling. Her hands were clenched tightly at her sides, desperately trying to project an air of defiance. "But she failed." "You're just a spoiled little princess who has no idea how dangerous this world really is," I blurted out. My words came rushing forth too quickly, too sharply, driven by some hotter, uglier emotion that I wasn't ready to face yet. "You think you can do whatever you want, that bad things will never happen to you because they've never happened to you, at least not yet. But the world isn't like that at all. People like you..." I stopped mid-sentence. She was shaking so violently that her teeth were almost chattering, and though her lips were clenched tight, trying their hardest to hold back, they still trembled as she struggled to stay upright in front of me. I snapped my eyes shut, took a deep breath, and forced the raging fury back down into my gut, exactly where it belonged. One last time, I slammed my fist hard against the brick wall, the vibration rippled up my arm, bringing me back just a sliver of sanity. When I opened my eyes again, I took half a step back, just enough to give her some space. "You can't risk your own safety," I said, my voice dropping lower, still rough but now controlled. Each word came out slowly and deliberately, as if every single one had cost me dearly. "Absolutely not." She looked up, blinking rapidly, her tears streaming even more profusely. Yet she still wiped her face with the sleeve of her coat, forcing herself to stand tall. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking somewhere in the middle. And that made something inside me twist painfully. A deep, awful, protective feeling, a feeling I'd been trying so hard not to examine, finally burst forth in full force. I could no longer deny it. My concern for this girl had long since gone beyond mere little brother's girlfriend level attention. Her tears, her vulnerability, they were all too much for me to ignore. I exhaled sharply, muttering under my breath, "Let's go." I turned around and took a few steps toward the alley's entrance, only to hear her unsteady footsteps behind me, her sneakers scuffing against the uneven pavement. When I glanced back, I saw that she'd lost her balance, her dance bag had slipped off her shoulder, and her knees were nearly buckling. I quickened my pace, stepping forward to grab her arm and steady her. As soon as my hand closed around her arm, she winced in pain. It wasn't an exaggeration, not even a loud cry. She just gasped sharply, her muscles instantly tensing beneath my touch. I frowned, lowering my gaze to my fingers, which were now firmly clasped around the curve of her slender arm, and that's when I noticed it. The bruise. It had already begun to darken. Against her pale skin, the faint outline of finger-shaped marks, a reddish-blue hue, was starting to emerge. Anger surged over me once again, and before my eyes, everything seemed to turn crimson. How dare those bastards treat her like that? How dare they leave such scars on her body? I wanted nothing more than to chase after them right this instant and make them pay a far heavier price. Yet at the same time, as soon as I saw the bruise, a wave of heartache washed over me, overwhelming me completely. I immediately released my grip and stepped back as if I'd been burned. "Let me take a look," I said, my voice low and hoarse. She hesitated, her big eyes filled with suspicion, as if she thought I was about to lose my temper again. But after a second, she sighed, pulled down the sleeve of her short top, and revealed the full extent of that ugly scar. It was even worse than I'd imagined, not just a handprint. The color was grotesque, the mark deeply unsettling. That bastard had squeezed so hard that the would probably linger on her skin for days. My fist clenched tight, and the urge to find them, to finally put an end to this, burned so fiercely it almost consumed me. Without a second thought, I started walking in the direction they'd fled. Halfway there, I felt someone grab hold of me. A tiny pair of hands gripped my forearm, pulling with all their might to stop me. Though their strength wasn't great, it was enough to make me halt. "Asher," she said, her voice trembling, her fingers gripping even tighter. "Don't leave me." That one sentence shattered me. More than anything else tonight, it broke me. Her dependence, her fear, they struck my heart like a sledgehammer. All the anger and frustration that had been boiling inside me instantly dissipated, leaving only one thought: I couldn't leave her, not ever. More than anything else tonight, it broke me. Slowly, I turned around and looked down at her. I saw her hands clutching mine tightly, as if I were the last solid anchor left in a world falling apart. Look into her eyes, still brimming with tears, and she's pleading with me, a plea that goes far beyond "don't go fight those guys. Don't leave me alone. Don't make me stand in the darkness by myself again." The anger instantly melted away, leaving behind only an emptiness, a hollow shell, like a building gutted by flames. I stared at her for what felt like an eternity. Then I bent down and gently pried open the fingers that were clutching my arm, though I didn't let go completely. "Let's go," I whispered. This time, she followed without a single word of protest. Together, we walked back to my car. Every few steps, her shoulder brushed against mine, and her dance bag clutched tightly to her chest, held as if it were a shield. Once more, I opened the passenger side door for her, and this time, she obediently climbed in. I went around to the driver's seat, started the car, and turned the heater up full blast until warm air began blasting out of the vents, trying to chase away the chill that had settled deep within both of us. As I drove off the roadside and merged onto the main road on my way home, I didn't look at her. But out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of her. She was still trembling slightly, clutching her dance bag tightly, as if it were the only thing left to hold onto. Once again, I realized, tonight, we'd almost ended up with a completely different outcome. And I, too, had almost missed expressing my true feelings for her. Watching her slight tremor, I clearly understood that from worrying about her safety, to feeling deeply sorry for what she'd been through, and now to this overwhelming urge to protect her completely, my emotions toward Penny had already changed utterly, without me even noticing. The initial distance and coldness were gone forever.